Hey guys and gals, on this video I will be talking about His Dark Materials Series 2, Episode 3 and Episode 4, so sort of a highlights of both episodes if you like the overall gist of them. And Episode 3 is called Theft and Episode 2 is called Tower of Angels, I should say. So this is really bringing the season into focus and the main kind of arc of it, which is to do with the subtle knife, this object, which it becomes clear, particularly in the second episode, what it's all about. It's set up in episode 3, and things are really starting to come together, because the first 2 episodes of this series I was very sort of hit and miss on. And it sort of feels like there's a bit more of a focus now and things clicking a bit more than they had been in the first 2. So in any case, I'll talk briefly about them. Episode 3, Theft, is actually really strong. I think it might be my favourite episode of this season so far. There's some really good stuff with Lee in it, actually, which I'll talk about in a minute. So it starts with the witches and their land is kind of destroyed and what have you, and it's the fallout from last week with the Magisterian actions towards them. And as I said in the previous review, it's almost like playing on themes of like sort of modern like terrorism type thing. So there's a little bit of fallout with that, and they basically discuss the importance of getting to Lyra, how that has to be the mission. And the initial witch, the one who sort of went rogue and kind of set this whole thing in motion with her kind of attempts to rescue the prisoner, she is sort of apologetic in her sort of dealings with them, and says, I made a mistake, but it was me, I acted alone. Which of course the Magisterian didn't accept, or didn't want to accept. They had this sort of bias anyway. But they all sort of agree that the focus now has to be Lyra. And this is where the wheels are sort of set in motion, because it seems as though everything, from the point of view of other characters, it becomes about finding Lyra now. So the witches set off on this like journey as well to find Lyra, and they have to go through like the Magisterian like representative, like guarding the sort of portals to do it. So there's a little bit of warfare, if you like, there for them to do it, but they're on their journey now. Meanwhile, back in this other like dimension, this other world, Will sort of awakes and he's having like memories of his father. He decides that he wants to try and track him down, but he needs Lyra's help to do so. But Lyra has decided to go back to Oxford, like the real world Oxford, to try and get more information. So Will isn't aware of that. She's kind of snuck off without him knowing, as a way, she figures it'll try and put him in danger if he goes along with her. So what basically happens is Lyra goes back to Oxford and she talks to Mary again. They had that previous encounter, and Lyra introduced her to who she was and the potential and the whole, thing with dust and what have you. But a policeman sort of interrupts them, and Lyra has to try and take on this sort of position that she's someone else. She's just a student of Mary's. And the policeman is very sort of suspicious, starts asking questions, and basically Lyra, it soon becomes clear that the policeman is, he's on to Lyra, but there's something sinister about him, so she has to try and make a sort of a quick escape. And it soon becomes clear in this episode, which had been hinted at in the previous episodes, that the police, they're sort of working along with the Magisterian. That then they kind of have it in for Lyra and their side. So they're, it's not just that they're trying to uphold the law or what have you. It's they've got other agendas. So Mary is obviously very protective of Lyra in this episode. At the same time, she's obviously keen to find out more about the dust and the research and what exactly went on with Azrael and what have you. So she's doing her own investigation. Meanwhile, Carlo is on his own individual sort of mission, and I think it's in the next episode where he actually tries to go to Mary and tries to get information out of her. And we start seeing more of his character in this season, more of his sort of persona and the way he's maybe a bit old fashioned, a bit, cynical of women and a bit, kind of sexy. He used certain things, like he tries to butter Mary up at one point with this quite patronising speech about how he likes, kind of ambitious women and what have you. But I sort of like the way that Mary's smart enough to kind of see through his bullshit as well. And she knows that this guy doesn't have good intentions, so she knows to try and protect Lyra. But anyway, probably in a way, the most unexpected scene of episode 3 is when Lyra and Will go to the cinema as a way to go undercover. Because what happens is that Lyra meets back up with Will, who's obviously followed her through to Oxford. And she tells him, they're after us, the authorities, we've got to lay low. And she promises to help him, like, find out more about his father and stuff. And she reveals certain stuff with the Leafeologer and tells her what she's found out about his father. But ultimately she promises, I will help you find him. But they have to lay low for the time being, so they go to the cinema. And it's a surreal scene because they're talking during the film and everything, and they're having popcorn. And that's a really funny sort of thing because, of course, Lyra, not being from this world, has never tasted popcorn before, and it's sort of hilarious because she finds it both disgusting but sort of addictive as well. And it is almost like this perfect metaphor where, yeah, it is kind of disgusting, but it's very addictive. I mean, I like the taste of popcorn, but you can sort of see the metaphor they're going for here. But yeah, the film they're watching is actually Paddington, which is just hilarious. So that's obviously something they've added in from the original books. Now, I'm not sure if there's a scene in the original books where they go to the cinema as a way of cover. There possibly is. Someone can tell me if you've read the books in the comments. But it's just this funny, little detail. That in this case, they're watching Paddington, and they're also, I think, because the BBC are involved in this production, that's quite an easy one, because I'm pretty sure Paddington was partly funded by the BBC, so they own some rights. So that's quite a little clever one where they don't really have to pay for it, I don't think. But yeah, it's a cute little scene, and it's quite funny because Lyra's obviously being seduced by the popcorn and is like intrigued by Paddington on the big screen. It kind of captures her imagination. But what ends up happening is that she's tricked by Carlos at one point. He tells her then they can talk, and I think it's before she knows who he is, and that he's working for the Magisterium, or he's working against them anyway. So she sort of goes into his car because he offers her a lift, and they start talking, and he tricks her basically because at one point because he like locks the doors and stuff, so she cottons that there's something off about this. She manages to like get out in the end, like persuade him to let her out. But what happens is he steals the Leafeologer and he escapes, and she kind of tries to, but he's already gone. So at the end of the episode, Lyra and Will go to Carlos because he sort of leaves his details if you want to talk, sort of thing. And he makes them an offer of a deal. He offers them that if you get me the subtle knife, which is in a tower back in the other dimension, you can have the Leafiometer back. So that's kind of the introduction to this subtle knife, which at this point we didn't know what it was exactly. So that's kind of the cliffhanger at the end. And obviously it raises the stakes because the Leafiometer is obviously quite important in the grand scheme of things. But as I said, there's some great stuff with Lee Scarsbury in this episode, because he's searching for this professor who Azrael knew, and I think who is going to turn out to be Will's father, I think, possibly. But in any case, he sort of goes down this rabbit hole of, he ends up in this kind of backwater town. Actually, we also see the bear. The bear returns in this episode, and he talks to like a representative demon of the witches, and they kind of say that he fills them up. It fills him, like gets him up to date, and it's kind of this almost plot exposition just of what's happening, and that the big mission is to find Lyra. So that's again just again setting the wheels in motion to try and find Lyra. But it's quite a good scene, and it's great to see the bear anyway. But as I said, Lee is searching for this scientist, and at one point he comes across this doctor who starts telling him a few things, and it's a really dramatic scene actually, but it's quite good fun because he says he's a heretic, as in referring to, I think his name's Stantz, the scientist that he's looking for. We see him in the next episode. He's played by Andrew Scott, who's been in quite a lot of things. But yeah, he refers to him as like a heretic, and as it turns out, this doctor can't be trusted because he's actually working for the Magisterium, and what we find out is that the Magisterium has taken over this town. So basically everyone there is working for them, has some sort of a bias towards them. Some of them may be against their will, but they have been forced to kind of, uphold their views. So what happens is this guy tries to kill Lee. As Lee is leaving, he has a shot at him, and Lee, in retaliation, kills him. He ends up getting arrested, and that's where Miss Coulter enters into this episode, Maurice. So you get a decent amount of Ruth Wilson, which is never a bad thing. She enters and she finds out that Lee was arrested, and she sees it as an opportunity to try and get to Lyra. So she obviously uses her position, her powers to get in and talk with him. And it's a really great scene because she tortures him a bit. He's beaten down and stuff. We see the whole demon thing. Torturing to try and get answers, but he refuses. He just will not give up Lyra's position. And it's a really good character scene for both of them, because he does this speech about how, he makes her a better person, that, there's more good in her than anyone really. And it really sells Lyra again. It sells like the mission and the sort of moral beliefs of Lee. And at the same time, Miss Coulter, fascinating sort of character, because she's obviously very like sinister and has a presence again, but at the same time there's a sense that on some level she wants to find Lyra because she's her daughter, and there is a part of her that sort of cares. But I think what's great about it is that ultimately at the end of the scene, Miss Coulter lets, she has to like knock a guard out or knock him off or whatever. But she allows Lee to escape, and her reasoning is that anyone who cares this much about my daughter has to have her best interest at heart, and so she thinks it's a good thing that Lee is looking for Lyra, so she says, go ahead, look for my daughter. And if you find her before I do, then protect her, with your life. And he says, I will. So it's a nice little scene, and it kind of shows that there is still some morality with Mrs. Coulter. It's sort of interesting because she's looking for Lyra as well, and she's very much like flirting between the dark and the good, so she maybe doesn't necessarily have the best of interests, but at least she wouldn't kill Lyra, and I think on some level she believes that she to protect Lyra, sort of thing, so she lets Lee go because of that. So good episode actually, and I really like the stuff with Miss Coulter and with Lee Scarsbury. So in the next episode 4, the subtle knife really comes into focus, and there's a cameo by Terence Stamp, which is quite effective. He's always good value as this guy who's guarding this tower, and he basically, that's been his mission, and his mission is to eventually stay there and to pass on the knife to whoever is chosen to replace him. And obviously it's back in this dimension, you've got like spectres like sort of swirling around the tower, but obviously Lyra and Will have to get into the tower, have to get to the top, well, to get the knife, because they made the deal with Carlo, and they get to the top, but there's this other like young man trying to like steal the knife, and it becomes this whole fight with him and Will, and the other guy is meant to be like working for the Magisterium, and there's this whole thing back and forth where eventually, because Will is able to fight him off and like stab him with the knife and stuff, that appears to be a signal to the Terence Stamp character that Will is the man who, or the person who needs to be the knife, then it is his sort of mission. So you get this symbolic sort of thing where he passes it on to Will, he kind of teaches him about the knife and the history, which we get a little bit of a dialogue over. And of course the spectres become a big thing in this episode because they're swirling around the tower. And we find out that they were left because of the dust experiment with Azrael. They came out of that. But in any case, yeah, there's this whole thing where you get Will agonising over the knife and trying to find out how to control it. And he obviously feels bad because what this means effectively is that the Terence Stamp character has to die. And there's some stuff in this, because I'm not a massive Will fan, so him experimenting with this knife and being all angst ridden and stuff, it got a little bit annoying because I don't think his acting is the best. But it obviously brings the whole knife into focus and its origins. And the guy who, like the young guy who was trying to steal the knife, who's that? Okay. Yeah, the young guy who tries to steal the knife is killed then by the spectres, because he's out in the open then, and yeah, he comes out of the tower and they're surrounding the tower. And Lyra and Milt will their mission become clear, and that is to steal back the Leafy Armiger, because Lyra says to try and find your father, we need the answers for that. And there's more stuff with the Spectre. They end up like attacking this other guy, and basically Will's going to be blamed for that. But Lee Scarsbury finds Stantz, the scientist, and he fills him in on the history on the subtle knife, and again it's becoming the focus for the season. He's a very kind of down on his luck sort of character. Another one similar to Azrael, where he got too obsessed with his work and that became the focus, and as a result he kind of left his like son behind. So I think that's meant to be Will. And yeah, so Lee kind of makes a deal with him. He says, if you come with me and if you help me with this knife stuff, then I'll take you anywhere you want, and you can maybe find your son. So that sort of puts that in motion. And Andrew Scott is a good actor, so that's good casting. So that's all good. Miss Coulter and Carlo meet up, and he fills her in on what's happening with the dust and with the knife and the Leafy Armiger. And at the end of the episode, they basically decide to go through the portal, because he tells her about the portal. And that's where Will and Lyra is. So she obviously sees an opportunity to find her daughter, eventually catch up with Lyra. And so they're kind of working together at this point, Carlo and Miss Coulter, Maurice. So they go through the portal, I should say, and at the same time Mary continues her research, her experiments with the dark matter, and she finally connects with it. She finally gets a reaction from the dust, and this like sort of almost AI type technology starts speaking back to her and says that the spirits were in fact angels. And that ultimately they would get vengeance on the humans. That's kind of what their position was. So it's almost like this vengeance mission to wipe out the human race sort of thing. And that's what the whole Angel Tower comes from, basically. So there you have it. That's the 2 episodes. So that's His Dark Materials, episode 3 and 4, and I'll be back with a review of episode 5 pretty soon. Overall, good stuff. So I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.